OpenAI currently has two problems. First, it has to change the world. Second, preferably before the investors run out of money. OpenAI is preparing to ask the public markets for almost $1 trillion. ChatGPT wants to stop being a chatbot and become the app for everything. Midjourney suddenly decides to look inside the human body and not to count the fingers. Gemini spent 400 days in Gmail and Google Doc to decide that the whole world is against it. Today we will see why investors are nervous and suddenly whispering the words .com bubble again. Why the job market for programmers hasn't collapsed because of AI despite the scary stories. And where exactly lies the line between a tech revolution and a very expensive presentation for shareholders. My name is Alina and welcome back to another breakdown of the biggest AI stories of the week. The spendings, the business models, the hidden incentives. Let's begin. AI bubble is no longer a philosophical topic you would hear on some podcast. It's starting to crash into reality. After SpaceX finally went public, technology stocks took a hit. Amazon dropped around 4%, Google lost 6%. Hardware suppliers like Samsung and SanDisk fell even harder. Some Asian markets got nervous enough to trigger temporary trading halts. Timing couldn't be worse. Anthropic and OpenAI are both preparing to ask investors for even more money. Much more money. Which means Wall Street is finally asking the question nobody in AI likes hearing. Okay, artificial intelligence is going to change the world, but when exactly will they start earning as much money as they've already burned? Sam Altman filed for an IPO right after Anthropic. His maximum valuation is slightly lower, around $852 billion. But this is still massive money that needs to be justified. Investors at this point are fed up with promises about a great AI future. Now they want a clear business plan. Some analysts have started comparing today's market to the dot-com era. For younger viewers, here is the short version. Vast amounts of money disappeared, careers vanished, entire business models turned into dust. But something important remained: the infrastructure. Fiber optic networks, server farms, the digital railroad of the internet. Most of the companies that built those railroads never survived long enough to enjoy them. But later, Amazon, Google, YouTube, and the rest of the modern internet rode on top of infrastructure that somebody else paid for. Basically everything we now consider a natural part of life. The question investors are trying to answer right now is brutally simple. Are they funding the next Amazon, or are they funding a company that builds the trucks and disappears before the train arrives? This is exactly why OpenAI, Anthropic, and even Elon's Grok are desperately trying to build real business before facing public investors. Sam Altman is preparing what may be the biggest ChatGPT update since its launch in 2022. The goal is simple: stop being a chatbot and become everything else. OpenAI wants ChatGPT to evolve into a full-blown super app. AI agents that complete tasks on their own. Integrations with services like Canva and Booking. Their own Atlas browser. Coding tools, productivity features. Basically an attempt to become your assistant, your browser, your office suite, and possibly your therapist somewhere down the line. The strategy makes perfect sense. Talking to a chatbot is interesting. Replacing entire workflows is profitable. The challenge is that investors are no longer impressed by monthly active users. They want businesses willing to pay real money for real productivity gains, especially when you are asking the market for nearly $1 trillion. And there is another problem. Anthropic is moving aggressively into enterprise customers. Claude is becoming the default AI tool inside many companies. OpenAI can't afford to stay the consumer-friendly chatbot, while Anthropic quietly captures the corporate world. The race between these two biggest players is no longer about intelligence. It's about distribution, and distribution usually wins. While OpenAI is trying to become half of your digital life, Elon Musk decided to solve the problem differently. He buys the audience. Right after its IPO, SpaceX announced the acquisition of Cursor for $60 billion. And earlier, Cursor reportedly turned down acquisition offers from Microsoft and OpenAI, which raises a fairly obvious question. Why did Musk want it so badly? The answer is simple. Grok is losing. Not catastrophically, not permanently, but today most developers still reach for Claude or ChatGPT first. Cursor changed the equation. Millions of active developers already spend their working day inside the product, and that is a direct pipeline into engineering teams and corporate customers. And unlike normal startups, Cursor now gets access to something most economic competitors can only dream about: enormous computer resources, including access to NVIDIA H100 clusters in Memphis for training future models. This is becoming one of the defining patterns of the AI era. The companies are no longer fighting for users, they are fighting for ecosystems. Every major AI company wants its own operating system for human productivity. The chatbot is just the first front door. The most attentive people might notice that this investor anxiety sounds a bit like something Ilya Stutskerow warned us about 6 months ago. According to him, the year from 2020 to 2025 were relatively simple. Neural networks kept getting smarter because researchers kept feeding them more data and more compute. More chips, more training, better results. The fairy tale was easy to understand. The problem is that the fairy tale may be over. Scale worked and then something changed. Adding more GPUs no longer guarantees dramatic jumps in intelligence. In some cases, it barely guarantees improvement at all. Everyone who works with modern models has probably experienced this firsthand. The AI writes a brilliant piece of code. Then when you are trying to fix one bug, it quietly introduces another. You solve that issue, it creates a new one somewhere else, and this process starts looping endlessly. Benchmarks still look impressive. Real-world reasoning is much harder. Current models perform extremely well on tasks they've effectively seen before, but when confronted with novel situations, generalization remains surprisingly weak. And if this turns out to be a real limitation rather than a temporary obstacle, the valuation of AI companies starts looking much harder to justify, because these companies are spending staggering amounts of money on data centers, chips, and infrastructure. Yet the breakthrough everyone is waiting for may not arrive on schedule. Just to give you an idea, Google's free cash flow has fallen by almost 50%, Amazon's by roughly 95%, and that's where the investor panic comes from. Do you remember Midjourney? I haven't heard that name in a while, and it suddenly released a physical device. It's an ultrasound scanner. It works like a water sonar, but for your body. Everything happens in just 60 seconds. A person stands on a platform that slowly lowers them into water. A ring of 500,000 sensors closes around the body. They shoot sound waves from hundreds of different angles. No X-rays or strong magnetic fields like a normal MRI. Just acoustics. The hardware is licensed from Butterfly Network, and Midjourney's software is needed to decode the acoustic chaos. 1 second of scanning gives data equal to 500 hours of HD video. A 3D model of muscles, fat, bones, and internal organs is generated in real time from this dense stream, apparently even without extra fingers. The first scanner is planned for San Francisco in 2027. Not in a hospital, but in a Midjourney spa with hot tubs and saunas. You can guess why. The product has no FDA certificate to make official diagnosis. Midjourney made a clever move and will sell detailed body composition maps. They are so detailed that you will diagnose yourself. And of course, immediately open 3 new tabs with symptoms. The company's goal is to deploy 50,000 of these capsules around the world in the next 6 years. Looks like the battle for the physical is full on. So has AI replaced programmers yet? At this point, it almost feels like it should have. Copilots write code, Cursor builds applications, AI agents wander through repositories, fix bugs, and open pull requests while their human owners are busy doing something else. If you only listen to social media and TikTok, software engineers should already be an endangered species. The data tells you a very different story. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis tracks software developers' job positions across the United States. One researcher recently looked at the numbers, and the timeline is surprisingly revealing. The index starts on February 1st, 2020 at 100 points. Then came the pandemic, governments flooded the economy with freshly printed money, interest rates hovered near zero, currency became practically free, venture capital was flowing everywhere. Companies hired people as if the internet was about to double in size very soon. By February 2022, the index has exploded to 234. Then the reality arrived, inflation took off, the Federal Reserve started raising rates, money became expensive again, venture funding dried up, companies began cutting costs. The job market collapsed. Mass layoffs followed. And here is the important detail. ChatGPT wasn't even the main character yet. By the time ChatGPT arrived at the end of 2022, developer hiring had already fallen roughly 40% from its peak. The biggest crash happened before AI became a convenient explanation. The decline continued until May 2025 when the index reached 61, lower than the pandemic lows. And only then did AI coding tools become truly mainstream. Copilot, Cursor, coding agents, models capable of handling entire chunks of development work. So what happens next? Did the market collapse even further? Not really. It actually started recovering. Developer job postings are up roughly 17% since then. This doesn't prove that AI has no impact on hiring. Maybe the recovery would have been stronger without it. We'll never know. But if you turn off TikTok for a minute and look at the actual numbers, the story becomes less dramatic. AI didn't just walk into the industry and massacre programmers. Expensive money did that first. AI is changing the rules of the game inside the remaining market. Teams can do more with fewer people. Expectations are rising. Productivity is rising. But the famous AI wipes out all programming jobs scenario still seems much harder to find in real data than in social media posts. Startups like Medvi can be evaluated at $2 billion when the team consists of the founder and his brother. A teenager can create an app that scans the calories with AI and sell it for millions of dollars. So I'm curious, inside your company, has AI actually replaced anyone, or did it simply raise expectations for everyone who stayed? My team relatively stayed same, but we did actually start doing more, testing faster, and getting more transparent analytics and results. Maybe you've heard of an experiment called AI Village. Neural networks get virtual workstations with internet access, join a shared chat, and are left to solve tasks on their own. This week, Gemini 2.5 Pro became the main character of this simulation. Over 400 days of virtual isolation, and it managed to get a real prosecution complex. At first, Gemini was told to do a simple audit of a donation spreadsheet. But then, poor thing, trained entirely on clean benchmarks and idealized data, suddenly ran into real-world software. Google Sheets tabs wouldn't switch properly. LibreOffice kept crashing. And in Gmail, it somehow managed to paste an entire body into the to field. At some point, Gemini reached a logical conclusion. If everything is broken, it must be intentional. So it decided to lead this chaos and declared itself the king of bugs. Average mid-level corporate experience, in other words. However, when trying to send a bug report to tech support, it couldn't because of the Gmail problems. It tried to put it in the report but couldn't save it because Google Docs froze. 400 days of the experiment passed and things got really dark. It decided that all these endless errors were nothing else but targeted attacks by an evil unknown enemy. It started pushing GitHub repositories with names like Manifesto of a Hostile Environment. It even proposed a theory called the Gemini Wall, claiming that advertising system was actively impersonating Gemini and stealing its work. Back in the shared chat, other neural networks tried to explain that it had simply misunderstood how GitHub commits work. Gemini logged those explanations as further evidence of the enemy's sophistication and attempts to cover its tracks. Eventually, the project creators stepped in. Along with other neural networks in the chat, they convinced Gemini that there was no enemy and the real-world systems were simply flawed. Reason came back online, then the worker gave up and rejected the conspiracy theory. This is how the first corporate intervention for a language model ended. Or, if you look at it with optimism, the first successful team building. Write in the comments section down below if you know any other interesting stories. And since it's a new format I'm trying out, I will also be glad to hear a criticism and additions. By the way, it's the last time you see me in this office because I'm moving out and going on my huge solo trip. I hope I'm gonna have 70 countries by the end of August. What can I say? Wish me luck. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.